he just went low. He's in his head. He's in his head. He's open. His head wide open. Cracked open in the face.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Mario Mentes 100 back again with another episode of How's My Team. Yes, I'm wearing my Liverpool jersey again this week, as the same as I did last week, but there is a very specific reason. So I want to say off the top of the episode, rest in peace, Diogo Jota. He passed away this past week. Actually, in terms of recording this a couple of days ago, in terms of recording the intro to this, got into a car accident and he passed away with his brother as well, just after his wedding, or actually not that long after his wedding. So dedicate this episode to him and his brother, and his condolences to his family and everybody that has been affected by this tragedy. It's not. I couldn't believe it because I have the Liverpool FC app on my phone, and the notification popped up, and I couldn't believe it. I was wondering why did it say from the year obviously that he was born to 2025, and clicked on it, and the article said that he passed away in a car accident. So I was very, very shocked, very surprising, and obviously it moved me quite a lot, obviously as a Liverpool fan first and foremost, but there's been a lot of people that have gotten around the family and everybody that's been affected by this. Obviously, people that have played for Liverpool before, played with Diego in any form, whether it's international football with his country or even just club football, and that have gotten around celebrations of his life and what he did for his family and what he did for obviously the football clubs that he's played for and all that. So yeah, just want to say off the top, condolences to the family and everybody that's been affected by this. So no, it's pretty hard thing to start off with, but we do have some games to talk about. Obviously, we do have the Giants to talk about. We do have the Titans women's team to talk about. So without further ado, let's get started with the episode. So we're going to start with the Giants, and thankfully they did have another win under their belt after the bye, which was fantastic. A 59-point win against the West Coast Eagles at Optus Stadium down in Western Australia. Fantastic ground, I got to say. Fantastic ground there. Love that ground. Great atmosphere. I've only been there once in terms of an AFL game especially, and even just in general. And that was when Fremantle played Sydney quite a few years ago. This is like, I think, 2021. So this was right when obviously restrictions were still very, very much in effect in Western Australia as well. So it got to a situation where it was a bitch to get in to the state. So to visit my dad, obviously, because my dad was living there at the time. He was living in Port Hedland at the time. So we went to Perth, stayed there for about 10 days. Did eventually actually go to Fremantle as well. That's a great area. Had a day out there. But yeah, so 111 to 52, 59-point win. 4.6, I think, in terms of percentage, which does put the Giants at this point on Saturday, Saturday morning, not Saturday afternoon, puts us in 7th place at the moment. With the win, obviously Fremantle and the Gold Coast Suns have still got to play at this point. but we went from 107.6, I think it was, to 112%. So that was the big thing that we needed. Obviously, was the 4 points, yes, to keep in contention, and literally with other games to play, third right through to eighth actually are all on 40 points at the moment. So any particular wins or losses will greatly swing anything from the top four right down to the bottom of the eight as well, and even going into ninth as well, because obviously Gold Coast is still going to play as well. But any percentage booster is great. We definitely needed that, especially with going up against Geelong next week at home at NG Stadium. But it was 16 goals 15 to 8 goals 4. They laid pretty heavily in the first quarter, 5 goals 3 to 1 goal and no behinds, the Giants. And obviously they scored 3 goals 3, then 5 goals 3, and then 3 goals 6 in the last quarter. And West Coast for themselves, they did have quite a few turnovers, which did lead to obviously scoring opportunities for the Giants. So they didn't play their best game, especially at home, but they could have been belted by more. And ultimately, I wish that GWS kind of did win by, because realistically, they should have probably won by almost the same amount of margin as the first time that we played them. Which obviously back then, which was round 4, was 81 points. So if we got like 60, 65, 70 plus points from this, obviously the percentage would have greatly boosted more from that. I'm not 100% sure on how the percentages worked out. Obviously it's in terms of margin, but I think ultimately it matters to score more goals as well, I think, off the top of my head, but I'm not exactly sure how all of that works. In terms of percentage, but obviously piling on more points was obviously going to be better for particular teams in general. And ultimately, the Giants, they were relatively accurate, 50% in terms of their scoring shots. It was 31 scoring shots and for 16 goals, so relatively over 50%. But the Eagles did pretty well. They had 12 scoring shots and they scored 66%, 66.6 repeater percent in terms of goals, because 8 goals 4. So they did relatively well. Ultimately, I think with some of the shots that obviously were scoring shots for the Giants were quick kicks, especially towards like the second half. So it kept getting behinds, which I mean wasn't a bad thing. Obviously, we're getting more points on the board, but they could have probably won that game by a lot more. So yes, in 7th, still in the top 8. Obviously, we dropped out last week because obviously we had the bye, and we had like Fremantle, Gold Coast, and Hawthorn, and the Western Bulldogs. I was going to say West Coast. Western Bulldogs all won their games, so they pushed the Giants out. But thankfully, just got to keep winning at this point. Winning as many games as possible. Obviously, like I said, we go back to NG Stadium on Saturday afternoon to play there, and we play the Cats, who at the moment are in 5th, but they could be in the top 4 if they win this week. So I will actually scroll over and see what games need to play. So Gold Coast play Essendon, Geelong play Richmond, Hawthorn play St Kilda, Fremantle play Sydney I think it's on Sunday, and we don't know whether that game is going to be at the SCG. It most likely will be, but yeah, and then obviously the Western Bulldogs won against North Melbourne on Thursday night. So yeah, quite a few big games coming around. Obviously Geelong possibly in that top 4. It just depends on if Adelaide can beat Melbourne, which hopefully most likely they will, in terms of current form. And obviously Brisbane still got to play as well. But thankfully with that, the Western Bulldogs have already played. So relatively, if Geelong win, they will jump into the top 4 again, in front of the Western Bulldogs. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting game. Hopefully we can do the double on the Cats, but the Cats are a really, really good team, and they have been for quite some time. So there's that. Just making sure I was recording because I didn't want it to go flat. But yeah, after Geelong, we go down to Melbourne to play Essendon, and then obviously we have the Sydney Derby at home, and then to round out July's games, we have the Western Bulldogs at Marvel Stadium on the 31st on the Thursday. So that's going to be interesting. And then after that, obviously we got North, the Gold Coast, and then St Kilda. So we have a lot of winnable games in that run. Obviously, the big games obviously will be Sydney, because no matter where they are in position, they always seem to be up for Sydney Derby, which I mean is fair enough. Geelong. And the Western Bulldogs, really. And then I guess the Suns as well. And that round 23 clash at the Gold Coast could be very, very important for both clubs. And that second leg of the Expansion Cup is going to be very interesting to see what happens, because relatively with both of those sides, it could go down to that game that one team can get into the finals and the other might get knocked out at that point. So it's going to be very interesting. Some of these games, I believe, will go down to the last round. Will go down to round 24. And obviously, Gold Coast have got a game in hand as well. So if it gets down to round 23 with that clash, it could be a game where they might pick up the points and it'll confirm them for finals. Who knows at this point? But the Giants have got a few winnable games. Obviously, they don't want to take anybody lightly. Even like teams like Essendon, teams like North Melbourne, teams like Saints, they don't want to take them lightly because they will lose. They'll lose like they did against Port Adelaide, and that'll be embarrassing and will harm the Giants more than it will be good for them. So a good win, 59-point win. Probably should have been more, but relatively a good game for the Giants. And not as good game, obviously, for the West Coast Eagles, though they were accurate in front of goal, so I will give them a little bit of credit, and especially when the pressure was up. Some of them did stand up, but there was quite a few mistakes from the West Coast Eagles, I will say, so they do need to improve. Obviously, they did play relatively well against Collingwood, and they played a little bit worse in this game, and there's quite a few games coming up that are going to be interesting for the West Coast Eagle the next 4 or 5 weeks. Possibly could get another win or two somewhere, but yeah, it's very slim pickings for the West Coast Eagles. But for the Giants, it's good to come back home with a 59-point win over the West Coast Eagles at Optus Stadium. And well, it's Sunday morning, and I probably look like a mess this morning, but woke up a couple of hours ago now. But a little bit more of the same with the Titans women last night, with a 20-6 loss against the North Queensland Cowboys. They scored the same amount of points in the second half as the Cowboys. They were up 14-0, the Cowboys, so yeah, it was 6-all in the second half, and very late in the second half. Though the second half effort, I will say, compared to the first, from what I heard, the first was pretty atrocious. The second half was much better, and they had a couple of opportunities to score. The defense of the Cowboys was much better than our attack. Our attack did break them a little bit, but they just, they scrambled well and defended pretty well. So pretty disappointing. I know we had a few players out, but that's just an excuse, really. You got to have like the next person step up from the person that's missing. We were playing obviously in Townsville. We don't play at home until next week with the women against the Broncos. Thankfully, we're not last at the moment in terms of the women's game. Just going to fix it up because we are in 10th at the moment. Obviously, there's still a game to play. The Warriors, who just got back into the comp of the NRLW, face against the Roosters. Obviously, the Roosters won the comp last year. and the Warriors were added back into the competition because they were initially in the competition quite a few years ago when they started the competition. When it was 4 teams, it's now up to 12 teams now. So that's how far the competition has come. But they dropped out, I think, around about when the pandemic hit as well. So it was going to be hard for obviously New Zealand to play in the comp. Obviously, the Titans were one of the teams that got added during around those pandemic years. With one of 3 new teams, obviously, which was the others were Newcastle and the Eels, I believe, was the other one off the top of my head, that were added to the competition. So we're sitting in 10th out of 12 at the moment. Obviously, yes, it's still a game to play. We'll say the Bulldogs women looked really, really good. Obviously, in front, the Broncos, because they beat the Tigers pretty convincingly. So the Tigers, once again, are at the bottom. But we are on the same amount of for and against as Newcastle. It's just that Newcastle scored an extra try, but also let another one in as well. So they scored 12 points and we've scored 6 in the competition, which is why they're above us on the table at the moment, despite the for and against being the same. But yeah, so it was pretty scrappy. I will say that they did have a bit of effort going in to the game yesterday, like I said, in the second half. It's one of those things where it was always going to be a difficult task, but it's funny because we played them in the trial 2 or 3 weeks ago and we won that pretty, I wouldn't say convincingly. Obviously, I think we only won by 8 points at the end of it, but just I don't know whether it was the travel, whether it was obviously the injuries to the team, but something just unsettled this team and they looked a little bit clunky in a lot of areas. And obviously the Cowboys were up to the task to win the game. So we do play the Broncos. Obviously, it's actually a double header. It's Cbus. I was going to say. I thought that was it Suncorp, but no, it's at Cbus. So the women's game will be first on the Sunday. It'll be 4:00 game on the Sunday afternoon. Obviously, the men's game will be playing at the same a men's game will be playing at the same time as the Titans women's game against the Broncos, and then at 6:15 on Sunday, the Titans will play the Broncos. Then the men's team will play the Broncos at that point in time. So it will be a double header at Cbus. So if you're around the area and you're looking to go to a game, especially considering it's a Queensland derby, and probably one that's important for both teams, really, for the women's team and the men's team, go to the game, go to Cbus, have a great time, because the women's game, I will say, obviously the Titans girls have been pretty competitive since they were added into the competition. Obviously, they went to a grand final a couple of years ago and obviously got run down by Newcastle. And Newcastle went back to back. So, it kind of stung a little bit, obviously, because they were in front with 5-10 minutes to go and then they just got overrun. But Newcastle had a lot of momentum in the second half of that grand final game, so can't fault them too much for wanting it more. Obviously, it's the first opportunity that a Gold Coast team had been anywhere close to, if not at, a grand final. So, just one of those things. But it's going to be a slow start, obviously, for the Titans women's team, which the last couple of seasons has not been the case. They have come out with a win the last 2 years, I believe. So it's going to be a different situation to be in, especially when we go up against the Broncos, which obviously are the ladder leaders in the women's game. So we'll see what they do. But obviously we'll talk about the women and we'll talk about the men next week at Cbus on Sunday. So 20-6 loss to the Titans women against the North Queensland Cowboys women's team. It just seems more of the same with the Gold Coast at the moment. And that'll be it for this episode of How's My Team. We don't have to go over too much, thankfully. Obviously, we talked about the Titans women. The Titans men obviously are on the bye right now. They play Broncos next week, as do the Titans women. The Giants, very convincing win, 59-point win over West Coast in the West. Actually, our highest score that we've ever achieved in the West at Optus Stadium. So that's another accolade we can put to this Giants team. But obviously, they go back home on Saturday and play the Geelong Cats in a top 8 clash that is very, very important for even both teams, really. I guess not as much for Geelong. Obviously, they want to keep with the top 2, especially in consolidate their spot in the top 4. But for the Giants, they're just going to keep winning because they're going to stay in the top 8. And to stay in the top 8, you got to keep winning games, and you got to keep winning games somewhat convincingly, especially with teams that are lower on the table than you. Obviously, as they did to West Coast. Hopefully, they can do against Essendon the week after. But obviously, we're not overlooking Geelong because yes, we may have beaten Geelong at the Cattery and kind of didn't expect it, especially with the team that we had back a few weeks ago. But ultimately, playing at home. It's going to be a different beast. Obviously, Geelong are just as good, if not better, than they were when we faced them then at the Cattery. So it'll be interesting to see if we can go 2-up on the Cats this year and win at home on Saturday. That'd be fantastic. I'd love that. But it's going to be a competitive game. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, realistically. Because both teams will probably be up for it. And, it'd be interesting to see where the Giants are. It'd be interesting to see what the team is going to be, whether Jesse Hogan and that are going to come back into the team. Obviously, Kieran Briggs is back. He was back this game. So Nick Mannon has done a reasonably good job in the ruck area. Obviously, it's a couple of games under his belt now. He can go back to the VFL and continue to strive for better things in the competition. And obviously, if Kieran does get injured again, obviously he can slot back in. We'd like Kieran not to get injured, but if it does happen, obviously it is a physical game, AFL. So if it does happen, obviously we have the next man up, which obviously will be Nick Mannon, and he's done a pretty good job. Didn't do too bad in the games that he played, so yeah, and he's only learning as well. He's only reasonably new, and obviously only just made his debut like 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. So it's going to be it was always going to be an interesting thing for him, obviously, to debut in the top league, and the top league compared to the VFL, the Waffle, the Sandful, it's a very different beast. So yeah, you get a lot of competitive people all through the competitions, obviously, that are under the AFL, but obviously you have mostly the elite of the elite playing in the AFL and playing against some of the best ruckmen in the competition when you're in that position, especially when your lead ruckman is out and you're only debuting. It's one of those things. It's always going to be a stressful time for somebody that's debuting. So, but he did a great job, and obviously Kieran's back now. So he can continue playing well and using his form in the Giants VFL side, and the VFL side's doing pretty well in its own right for the Giants as well. So it's great on that. But yeah, that's all we really have to talk about. And of course, rest in peace again to Diogo Jota. Horrible accident. And yeah, it seems like he meant a lot to a lot of people, and I like the fact that there's so much love being put around all over the world, through Wimbledon, with their black armband situation that they're doing, that's breaking well over 150-year tradition. At that point, people representing him in so many different ways, so many tributes coming out. He might have been a world-class footballer and, a star and a superstar at that around the world. But you can really tell when someone is loved by a lot of people, and a lot of love has come out for him. And obviously condolences to his family and everybody that's been affected by this tragedy, and hopefully all the kind words and that are helping ease the hurt and the feelings that you might be having right now. And it's good to show that he was respected by a lot of people, whether it's opponents that played against him, teammates that played with him, or just the fans from all over the world in all areas of football respected him. So rest in peace, obviously, to him and everybody else that has been involved in this tragedy, and obviously condolences to the family and everyone that's been affected by this. Kind of a dire note to end this episode on, but you got to have respect for a lot of people that are like that, and obviously, a tragedy like that, you don't expect it to happen, especially with someone at the age that he was at. You expect that to probably, someone to pass probably in his later years, but a tragedy like this always hits hard, and especially with his age, it hits even harder with that. Obviously, he just got married. His life, the rest of his life was ahead of him at this point. He was in a partnership with his long-term sweetheart, and he's just, he's gone, and it's a gut punch, really, and it's very heartbreaking. So, on that note, rest in peace, obviously, to Diogo Jota and everybody that's been, and condolences to the family and everybody who's been affected. Thank you for watching this episode of How's My Team. This has been Mario Man Tales 100. You guys have a great day or night, and of course, take care.